Hey, what's up, Summit? My name is Matt McCann. I'm the junior high director here at Calvary Church, if I haven't met you yet. And I have to say, ever since I've been on staff with Calvary, I have wanted to be a student of Summit just because I share an office with Sam, and I think Sam's super cool. And so I'm jealous of you guys that you get to hang out with him on a regular basis. Even though Sam makes fun of me all the time. Totally fine. So anyways, I think you guys are great. Shout out to Trevor. Dab. I'm going to do a couple dabs for Trevor there. Anyways, Sam wanted to do some talks this summer with you guys on the red letters of Jesus, so the words of Jesus, and then the black letters of Jesus, so the actions that he did. And so this week I'm going to share a red letter talk about the words that Jesus said. And I want to approach this with the thought of, what if Jesus was serious? Just kind of in the back of my mind. And it's an interesting question, right? Like when you reflect on the words that Jesus taught, what if he was serious? And so when I think of the red letters, the things that he said, I go to the Sermon on the Mount. So this is found in the book of Matthew, chapters 5-7. And he just got his ministry going. He's earned the right to be heard because he's done a bunch of miracles up to this point, and now people are wanting to know, what does he have to say? So this is when Jesus shares his thoughts on the kingdom of heaven.
All right, all you sinners, come with me. It's time to pay the piper.
Okay, so it wasn't quite like that, but Jesus is sharing something very interesting that challenged the way people thought during his time. So during his time, the crowd that was around Jesus, if Jesus was the Messiah that they think he is, they had a few thoughts already of who he would be. And a few are like, he's going to be this mighty warrior that overthrows everything, right? Or like this mighty king that establishes his kingdom here and now. And during Jesus' ministry, he had a different idea of what the kingdom of heaven would look like. Now, he is going to come back, and he is going to be a mighty warrior and a mighty king, and he's going to set up his kingdom. But we see that in Revelation, and so the book of Revelation is sort of like, stay tuned, we'll be right back. All right, we're not going anywhere. But during his time, during his ministry, he's trying to get the people to understand a different idea of what the kingdom of heaven looks like. So that's where we get the Sermon on the Mount, and this famous sermon, and a few key things that I think are helpful to understand. So it starts off with the Beatitudes, and the Beatitudes are like this countercultural type of behavior. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. It's just different. And then he goes into, after that, he goes into these statements, these 6 statements, and he starts at each one of them off with, you've heard that it's been said, but, and so he's like describing, like, you may understand this topic this way, but I'm going to turn it on its head. Like, I'm going to flip it upside down. I need you to understand it a different way. And then from there, he goes into a few behaviors that we all do. So he talks about giving, praying, and fasting. And he wants us to think about these behaviors differently as well. And so he wraps up his famous sermon, all right, wraps it up with this truly like terrifying statement. He says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. And you might be thinking, well, of course, like, I'll do more than just say I believe. Like, I'm going to do more than just say Jesus is Lord. Faith without action is nothing, right? So Jesus then, like, he doesn't just leave that statement at that. He goes on to compare, like, what we would say, like, are some of the greatest Christians. Because not only are they going to say, Lord, Lord, they're also going to be proclaiming good news. They're also going to be casting out demons, and they're also going to be performing miracles. Now, I've never casted out a demon before, and I have yet to perform a miracle. But according to Jesus' words, There are some who do those things and still don't get it in the kingdom of heaven. Now, why is that? And again, we're approaching this, right? Like, what if what Jesus has said was, what if he was serious? You know, and so he says these things, and it's because he follows that up and says, I never knew you.
You're all evil. There is no hope. That's it. Thank you.
Now, I don't want to miss what Jesus is saying. He's not saying that proclaiming the good news of the gospel is bad, and he's not saying casting out demons is bad. He's not saying performing miracles is bad, right? What he's getting at with his whole message, this Sermon on the Mount, you know, Matthew 5-7, what he's getting at is our hearts. Not behavior, our heart. Not after governments or power or authority, our hearts.
What in the name of me is going on in here?
Okay, so let's focus on a specific part of his Sermon on the Mount. So I want to look at Matthew 6, verses 5-6. So I'm going to read that and then we'll talk about it. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now let me ask you something. When you pray, who are you praying for? When you pray, who are you praying to? When you pray, what are you trying to accomplish? So Jesus is calling out the hypocrite's behavior because that means nothing to him. I mean, it's nothing. Being thought of as a spiritual person is all the reward they're going to get, right? Like whatever opinion the crowds might form of him, that's it. That's your reward. Congrats.
No, I'm sorry. You'll never get into heaven now. You had your chance and you blew it.
Well, I guess I'll be going then.
I'm being surrounded by people and now I'm really uncomfortable. All right, I'm now on the move. I got surrounded by a bunch of people and got really self-conscious. So anyways, let's pick this back up, okay? Praying's supposed to be about a relationship between us and God, right? And so what Jesus is getting at, like, praying's not a new concept. He's not introducing something new here. And this sounds like, you know, a common problem that we have today of, like, we care a lot about what people think of us. You know, you think of our Instagram, social media kind of culture where, like, I'm going to project the image that I want people to think of when they think of me, but that's not real, right? And in the same way, Jesus sees this all the time with people trying to have what they think is a relationship with God, and really what it ends up being is, I just want to appear spiritual. And that could be, you know, prayer then becomes a tool just to, you know, project or promote your own self-interest. So he's saying, stop, what are you doing? And introduces this awesome idea of secrecy, which doesn't sound like something God would say, right? Like, you know, he's not saying that praying in public's wrong. He's not saying that these things are bad. But again, thinking about the Sermon on the Mount, he's after our hearts, right? So when I share a secret, I don't want to share it with somebody I don't trust. And I also don't want to share it with somebody I don't know. And talking to a wall doesn't make sense either, right? That makes me a lunatic. So Jesus even, like, points out, like, go in your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who's unseen. And in doing so, you're going to be seen. You're going to be heard. And this is good. So, I'm going to share something really special with you guys. So this is a place I go to that was very special, all right? It's a secret place I go to very often. And nobody knew about it. And when I say like nobody knew about it, I mean like literally not a soul on this planet knew about it. So this is it's a real location. This is a real tree. And it was just God and I. We were the only ones that knew. And that made it really, really special. So Jesus, in the middle of his famous sermon, he says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." So this spot for me was in a time when I didn't feel like I had any treasure. And you might see this and think like, "Oh, what a nice, space to spend time in prayer." This image, this location was actually a place of anger, confusion, a lot of pain. This was a tree that was planted in memory of my brother. So my brother passed away when I was 13 years old. And I grew up in the church, and, I was the one that was memorizing all the verses, and, we lived and breathed church. We loved it. And so this tree was planted in like this crummy, like shadowy corner of the land next to barbed wire fence, where I actually like ran into and got scarred on my face. That you can see this like mark here in my beard. That's actually like because I ran into that fence when I was a little kid in the middle of the night. Couldn't see. Anyways, this tree wasn't like where I brew my hot cup of coffee and I sit and I stew on the goodness of, sorry, that sounds like I'm making fun of people that do that, but I just want to get the point across. This was a place where I was alone with God and nobody on the planet knew about it. This was secret. And I did this because of this passage. Because what if Jesus was serious? He's getting at our hearts, and he doesn't want us to do these things, to have these behaviors because of how we think the world perceives us. He's doing this because this is the gospel. For me, this was how I was being healed. This is how I was being heard. This is how I dealt with my sadness and my grief, sitting alone with God when I didn't have to perform or say the right thing or feel the pressure to lead really well even when things are hard, right? I heard a story of a guy who he was helping some church planners overseas, and he was giving advice on how to do this well. They were asking questions like, how do we evangelize really well? How do we connect, and how do we grow our church? And so the church planner, he gave him advice. He said, all right, here's what you're going to do. All right. You're each going to go off, into a different part of the community. You're going to befriend people you've never met before. You're going to get to know them. And then you're going to come back here. And then you're not going to report any of that to any of us. You're just going to sit on that. It's for you only. It's a secret. And they were like, what? Like, so we're not going to like strategize or talk about it and it was, no. You go out and you connect with people because that's what we're called to do. And in the same way, I'm challenging you all, over the course of this week, I would encourage you find a spot, go somewhere that's secret, that's safe, and I want you to go there 3 times this week and the next week. And I want you to try it. I want you to sit in that space, and you can practice the Lord's Prayer, because that's a part of the Sermon on the Mount. This is a part of like Jesus showing like, hey, this is how I would encourage you guys to pray. You don't have to pray it exactly, but you could do that. But the point is, go somewhere, keep it secret, and just be with God. And then I want you to come back next week, or come during your Zoom call, and don't tell anybody. about what you did. Don't share this with anyone in Summit, because I don't want you to do your quiet time or your devos or your prayers or whatever, your journaling, for the purpose of sharing that with others. It's okay to have some things that are just with you and God. I've done this a few times in my life. I shared one of them, going to this tree. And it is a truly special time that was absolutely necessary. It contributed to probably the biggest growth I've ever had in my own faith. And that's because it was a sweet, special time that wasn't about anybody else except me and him. And I really hope you guys get to experience that too. So again, what if Jesus was serious?